Moscow is ready for negotiations. The Kremlin has announced its readiness to resume the Istanbul talks. The armed forces stopped a breakthrough by the occupiers in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Putin's residence is being attacked by drones. The dictator urgently fled from the Moscow region to Valdai. Mobile internet has been shut off in Russia until the end of the war. 18,000 deserters. A mass exodus of Russian soldiers from the front. Russia has run out of convicts. The Kremlin plans to lure prisoners from other countries into the war. China is transporting timber out of the taiga by train, while in Bulgaria, due to anti-Russian sanctions, there is only a month's supply of gasoline left. The Kremlin has begun mass mobilization in Russia. State media have been ordered not to publicize this. Hello, my name is Katerina Nestorenko, and right now, here are the main stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you on YouTube. The front. Recently, the situation there has escalated daily. Unfortunately, the occupiers have taken 3 settlements in Zaporizhzhia region. This was announced by Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi. He also added that the situation has significantly worsened in the Oleksandrivka and Huliaipol directions, where the Russians have advanced during intense fighting. However, the spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin, is not talking about 3 settlements. He states that the Ukrainian armed forces had to withdraw from positions near about 4 settlements in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Syrskyi reported to President Zelensky that the situation is difficult.
Russian occupation forces have intensified assaults in the Pokrovsk direction and in the Zaporizhzhia region. Weather conditions are favoring the occupiers' attacks, but Ukrainian units continue to destroy the enemy and hold their positions, said Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Oleksandr Syrskyi.
Military personnel are also writing about the extremely critical situation in the Zaporizhzhia direction.
The Zaporizhzhia direction from the right flank. In 2026, a collapse is expected similar to what happened in Donbass after Avdiivka and Ocheretain.
If the current situation is not addressed as it was in the Sumy region, everything could end in tragedy. But Ukrainian soldiers are responding quickly. According to the Southern Defense Forces, Ukrainian defenders stopped the advance of Russian troops and withdrew from Ravnopoli in the Zaporizhzhia region. That area is now a grey zone, but fierce fighting continues in other sectors of the front. Foreign Affairs reports that Russia wants to capture Ukraine in 3 stages. And the year 2026 will be decisive.
First, to hold the occupied territories and capture Kharkiv, Mykolaiv and Odessa, cutting Ukraine off from the sea. Second, to intensify economic and political pressure. Third, to draw Ukraine into Russia's orbit like Belarus.
Russia's goal is to capture Pokrovsk by December 15th and Kupiansk by the end of the year. This is reported by the media, citing sources in the defense forces. Let me remind you that in Pokrovsk, the south and southwest are currently under the control of the occupiers. The center around the railway is a grey zone, and the north is under the control of the defense forces. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge everyone to support the armed forces of Ukraine. If you're not able to do so financially, write them words of support in the comments. I know they are watching us. Moscow is ready for direct negotiations with Kiev. This was stated by the Chargé d'Affaires of the Russian Federation in Turkey, Alexei Ivanov. He says they are ready for this at any moment, but it requires political will, specifically from Ukraine. Danya is once again the main player. He did not announce that the Russian Federation is ready to resume the Istanbul talks.
The Russian side has repeatedly emphasized that we are ready to continue direct negotiations with the Ukrainian side, with the Ukrainian delegation. And our Turkish partners also consistently emphasize that the Istanbul platform remains at our disposal. These doors remain open to us. In the event that political will is shown by Kyiv, we are ready for such negotiations at any moment.
But he emphasized that negotiations between the Russian Federation and the West have stalled on the issue of negotiations themselves. And it looks like it will be for a long time. Most likely, Ukrainian long-range drones are having at least some influence on the Kremlin's decisions. They definitely affect Putin himself, since he is already running away from them. Recently, as journalists from the Sistema project report, Putin fled from Ukrainian drones from the Moscow region to Valdai. Almost all the events he supposedly held this year at his official suburban residence in Novo-Ogaryovo actually took place in Valdai.
Putin did not appear in the Moscow region from January to September. This conclusion was reached by journalists who carefully studied photos and videos featuring him.
It is known that Putin has several almost identical offices in different locations where he holds meetings, receives officials, and records televised addresses. But some details of the interior are different. Based on these details, the system determined that in the Moscow region and Sochi, places that are closer for Ukrainian drones to reach, Putin avoids staying and instead prefers to live and command officials from the Valdai residence, which is located right next to his huge private estate where his lover Alina Kabayeva lives. With their children together. By the way, in Valdai, there is more air defense than around the largest oil refineries in the Russian Federation. Well, listen, I think Valdai is a perfectly realistic target for Ukrainian drones and missiles. I would really like the air defense there to be activated more often. If you feel the same way like this video, let's send a signal into space. Reading the comments on the previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Write under this episode which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And for now, we continue. Next comes the most interesting part. Everything is stable in the swamps. Every night there are some kind of disturbances there. In Budyonnovsk, Russia, drones hit the Stavrolen gas processing plant. This plant is a subsidiary of Lukoil, and its design capacity is 2.2 billion cubic meters of gas per year. The plant also supplies products to local manufacturers and provides raw materials for Russia's petrochemical industry. Russians are complaining, but it doesn't help them. The friendly drones are hitting their targets right on the mark. We wish you, neighbors, many more nights and days like these. Russia is getting closer and closer to the Middle Ages. Roskomnadzor is gradually preparing Russians for an internet shutdown. Moreover, Russians are already complaining en masse about the lack of mobile internet. The most serious disruptions are being reported in St. Petersburg, Sochi, Tura, Voronezh, Ryazan, Krasnodar, Saratov, Nizhny Novgorod, and Ufa. What's more, even foreign SIM cards don't help, because Russia has started blocking internet access on foreign SIMs. And this could continue until the so-called special military operation ends. The shutdown has not been introduced temporarily, but on a permanent basis. It does not depend on air raid alerts or specific attacks. The main reason is the decision by regional authorities to expand so-called security zones around facilities connected to the special operation. In other words, officially, this is being done to counter Ukrainian drones, which can use mobile signals for navigation. Meanwhile, Bulgaria only has enough gasoline left for 1 month. Yes, US sanctions have hit Lukoil so hard that there are now almost no reserves left for all of Bulgaria. And the country may soon face a fuel shortage due to American sanctions. The restrictions take effect on November 21st and are already causing panic. It is the Russian company that controls the oil refinery in Burgas and hundreds of gas stations across the country. Moreover, as reported by Reuters journalists, there are fears in Sofia that the crisis could lead not only to shortages, but also to a political collapse, up to and including the fall of the government. Not only at the front, but also in Russian prisons, they are running out of people, or to be precise, dumb convicts. They are exactly who the Russian army needs. That is why the Russian Ministry of Defense intends to recruit criminals from other countries into its ranks. According to Russian media, the Government Commission on Legislative Activities has approved amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code.
Foreigners who sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense will no longer be extradited to other countries for criminal prosecution. Instead of extradition, they may be given only fines and corrective labor.
In this way, criminals are being lured to Russia with the promise that nothing will happen to them here. They won't be extradited, but they will be forced to fight. Is it even necessary to remind that after the fighting ends, all this Putin elite will flood into Russian cities? And they'll settle there, because outside of Russia, they'll be facing new criminal charges for participating in the war. Putin doesn't even consider what he's signing his country up for. There's a new wave of mass mobilization in Russia, and it's being carried out secretly and unofficially. In particular, people are being sent to the front under the pretense of guarding strategic facilities.
In SU, a huge number of occupiers are being processed in Pokrovsk and in Rodinska, in a key settlement that supports the entire Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration from the east. Ukrainian tank crews have crushed the Russian invaders to rubble.
Reports like these from Pokrovsk, the hottest spot in Donbas, are coming in almost daily. October has already become the bloodiest month for the Russian group throughout the entire war. However, it seems that November will break even this record. As a result of the colossal efforts of the defense forces, there have been record losses for the Russian Federation and consequently a new wave of mobilization, so far a covert one.
This term should be understood to mean several things. It refers to the recruitment of conscripts for contracts as well as the enlistment of reservists to guard important facilities, which the Russians have announced in many regions. This is a sign that the current flow of contract soldiers in Russia has decreased. The recruitment of foreigners also does not compensate for the losses in battle.
The Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation claims that Pokrovsk has become the site of incredible Russian losses. According to reports from Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, in their attempt to occupy the city, more than 30,000 occupiers have already lost their lives. And their number is growing every day.
The fact that Pokrovsk has turned into yet another meat grinder for the Russian occupiers is undeniable. And in general, no one is hiding the fact that the concept, not the strategy of Ukraine's defense forces is to significantly reduce the enemy's offensive potential as much as possible, to inflict maximum damage so that they lack the strength to continue and expand their offensive, and so that these infiltrations do not turn into breakthroughs of our defenses.
As always, the Kremlin decided to solve the issue through deception. Officially, they are not announcing a mobilization, but in reality they are rounding up literally everyone the security forces and the military can get their hands on.
What characterizes this draft? Brutal raids that ignore all deferments, all supporting documents, basically anything at all. And these brutal raids are happening not only in Moscow, but now also in the regions. There are already reports of raids in Kazan and Khabarovsk. This is alarming, this is bad, because it's one thing to have raids in Moscow and Makhachkala, but it's another thing entirely when raids are happening in cities with millions of people. This means that now they will simply cover
the entire territory as best they can, with police officers who will be rounding up all men of conscription age wherever they are.
At the same time, the previous rule that conscripts do not fight at the front is now a thing of the past. Now, the year-round draft that has been announced provides the army with a constant influx of people. First and foremost for recruitment. And by the way, this recruitment is violent everywhere.
This is signing a contract through pressure, let's say emotional pressure, when conscripts are called up and they already end up in the barracks. And there's a lot of it. Hazing still exists in the Russian army to this day. Here we've already forgotten what that's like. So you can put pressure on this recruit and force him to sign a contract that way. And he is no longer a conscript, he becomes a contract soldier. And as is well known, contract soldiers can be sent, according to Russian law, to the direct front line.
Russian human rights activists say that the methods in Russia haven't changed, but the scale of such contract signings has increased dramatically. If before these were local initiatives, now the order has come from above, to forcibly keep as many people in the army as possible. This
hidden mobilization continues. It doesn't start anew. I repeat, it never stopped. It's been going on since the fall of 2022. It's just a new phase of it.
Another method invented by the Russian military machine is to call up reservists to guard strategic facilities. Analysts explain that the scheme is designed for the gradual deployment to the front of everyone who has ever been connected to the army. To start with, such reservists will replace the current guards, whose fate is already sealed.
In this way, the state can take contract soldiers who are currently in Region N, send them to the front, and instead regularly rotate reservists in their place. 2 months, 2 months, 2 months. That is, the training camps they will hold for reservists are specifically for guarding these facilities.
And after several rotations, those very reservists will be sent to the front, and if there's time, they'll undergo field military training. If Russian losses do not decrease, the briefing will take place right on the bus on the way to the war. Putin needs an uninterrupted supply of cannon fodder.
The enemy has thrown literally everything they have at Pokrovsk. But they continue to suffer such devastating losses there that even a numerical advantage of up to 20 times in some areas does not allow them to take control of the city.
This matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Torture is becoming routine for Russians, especially for those whose relatives are in the military. The military police in Zabaikalsky Krai have launched a hunt for the relatives of Russian soldiers who have deserted to the SZH. Russian deserters are hiding in local villages, so how else can they force their whereabouts out of their relatives? There are no other options. According to the publication People of Baikal, the military police are literally torturing civilians.
For example, on November 2nd, a group of armed men in masks and camouflage forcibly dragged 24-year-old Pavel into a service vehicle. He is from the village of Trubachyovo. During the arrest, he was beaten, shocked with a stun gun, and pressured to reveal the whereabouts of his second cousin, who had not returned to his unit. Pavel's mother, Olga Vtorushina, said that the unidentified men arrived in 3 vehicles and drove through neighboring settlements in the district. After the interrogation, the victim went to the local hospital, where doctors documented signs of beatings, swollen finger joints, and marks from handcuffs. Pavel also filed a report with the police.
During the interrogation, Pavel was ordered to call his brother and ask him to come to a specified location. When his brother arrived there, he was immediately taken away. Interestingly, the brother, who is a soldier, had been held captive in Ukraine and returned home in the summer after a prisoner exchange. The family believed that after being a prisoner of war, he would not be sent back to the front, but soon after, Petr was sent back to the battlefield. And all this is because desertion from the army is becoming an increasingly widespread phenomenon. A year and a half ago, there were 8,000 cases of desertion opened in Russia. As of today, Russian garrison military courts have already handed down at least 18,000 verdicts. There are already hundreds of such stories involving torture. Because Putin urgently needs to replenish the army, especially after signing the decree on year-round conscription. And there aren't enough soldiers, they're dying, they're fleeing from the front. And the dictator really doesn't like that. Karma really does exist, and the story of the former Russian colonel of the political police is proof of that. His name is Ivan Rypin. He is the former head of the Yaroslavl E Center. He is known for beating his detainees, and these were severe acts of torture. But he was arrested on bribery charges. And now Rypin himself has started complaining about torture by law enforcement officers, as he told human rights activists. 2 police officers beat him, strangled him, and hit him on the head until he lost consciousness. Ivan has numerous injuries and even temporary hearing loss. That's karma in action for you. Because violence only breeds more violence. And this snowball in the Russian Federation can no longer be stopped. Russians should prepare for exhausting blackouts. Every strike on energy facilities in Ukraine now gets a response against Russian heating plants, thermal power stations, and others. Energy facility of the aggressor country.
More and more Russian cities are plunging into darkness. If Russians attack the Ukrainian energy system, Ukraine will attack the Russian one. The Ukrainian authorities warned about this, and the defense forces have demonstrated it clearly. The roof
Was blown off.
This is what the Voronezh thermal power plant looks like now, for example. It was attacked on November 9th. Reports say there were at least 3 direct hits. After the explosions, part of the city was left without electricity.
Voronezh is quite a significant city. There are a lot of enterprises in Voronezh that operate in the Voronezh region, including electronics. There are also aviation and military enterprises there.
This is exactly the difference between Russian and Ukrainian strikes on the power grid. In addition to a deserved response, the goal of the Ukrainian defenders is to plunge into darkness those energy infrastructure facilities that support the operation of the Russian defense.
Industry refers to the production of goods or services within a particular sector of the economy. And indeed, to try to attempt to halt their machine and to weaken or undermine the military-industrial complex, which is actively working against us in this war.
I think this trend will continue. At first glance, it may seem like pecking away at the liver of the Russian energy system, but in this way, various elements of the infrastructure will gradually be knocked out. At first glance, it may seem trivial, just satisfying that somewhere in Belgorod or Voronezh people had to sit without electricity. But let's think about it. In some ways, the configuration of the Russian energy system might be similar to ours, in the sense that the same power lines can supply not only the residential sector, but also, for example, industry and railway transport.
That's why none of these attacks are random. The goal is not just to respond, but to respond painfully, so that the facilities supplying power to the military-industrial enterprises of the aggressor country can no longer fuel the Kremlin's ambitions.
When various elements of the integrity of the Russian energy system are gradually undermined, it primarily means that somewhere a train carrying something the Rashists need for the war will stop, or there will be rolling blackouts at a factory producing important products for Russia.
And according to experts, not all such enterprises are located deep in the rear. Many facilities are located not far from the Ukrainian border. For example, strategic Tu-95 MS bombers are repaired in Taganrog. And one of the manufacturers of components for the Russian missile program, specifically solid fuel for the Iskanders, is located just 150 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Plunging them into electrical darkness is quite realistic. There are undoubtedly such important facilities for the Russian military-industrial complex in the Moscow region as well. And not just there, even in Moscow itself.
I think the psychological effect of plunging Moscow into darkness would be much more effective than shutting down a few factories. Because it's precisely this main mass, what do they call it, the office plankton, that lives off the regions. Finally, even they will realize that something is happening and that something needs to be done.
In this way, Ukraine will kill not 2 but 3 birds with one stone at once. A fair response would be to paralyze Russian military-industrial facilities and exert psychological pressure on the Kremlin. Sounds like the perfect target for the next blackout?
Putin thinks the whole world is afraid of him, but he hasn't noticed how the whole world is simply using him, and the so-called allies are the ones who benefit the most. Russians have repeatedly complained that oil and gas are going to China almost for free. But as it turns out, the problems there are even bigger. Now, the vast Russian taiga region is also for China.
It's all gone. Yeah. Well, the train always has at least 56 cars. There you go. Ah, what a smell of wood. So incredibly, absolutely fresh. So fresh. Farewell, my beloved taiga. You're leaving and heading off to China, and this time it is truly forever. I will miss you deeply, my dear friend. Farewell, farewell, my dear friend.
Yes, China is calmly plundering the most valuable resource, wood. And they're cutting down kilometers of taiga. Of course, Russia shows neither resistance nor outrage. They have to bow to the Celestial Empire. More and more military aid to Ukraine is coming from Poland. What exactly will be sent to the front in the near future by our neighbors and main partners in order to successfully repel enemy attacks right now?
More than 120 billion zlotys, or $4 billion. That's the impressive amount Poland has spent on aid to Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. This includes both humanitarian and military support.
Poland was one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with tanks, ammunition, and defense equipment on a large scale. Between 2020 and 2023, it delivered in particular more than 300 tanks, as well as armored personnel carriers, artillery systems, air defense systems, drones, mortars, assault rifles, and over 100 million rounds of ammunition. Other supplies were also sent to Ukraine, 10 airplanes and 10 helicopters. From 2022 to 2024, Poland delivered 47 packages of military aid to Ukraine. The value of the equipment supplied in 2022 alone amounted to 7.23 billion zlotys, and in 2023 to 2024, another 5.63 billion. Poland also supplied more than 19,500 Starlink terminals, providing the Ukrainian armed forces with stable satellite communication. This accounted for almost half of all terminals used in Ukraine by the end of 2023.
Poland's assistance to Ukraine is not the result of romantic enthusiasm, but is very pragmatic. Our neighbors understand that if Ukraine falls, Poland will be next in line.
After all, a Ukraine at war gives Europe time to better prepare for threats. This time is necessary, and we cannot afford to lose a single minute. We will be held accountable for every minute.
318 tanks were delivered to Kyiv by Warsaw. Among them were modernized T-72s, M1Rs, PT-91s, and Leopard 2S. This is more than anyone else has supplied. The total value of gratuitous aid, including training, logistics, repairs, and medical support, exceeded $4 billion by March of this year. Specifically, in 2022, it amounted to $1.6 billion. In 2023 to 2024, it was $1.3 billion. Poland also provided additional support.
Poland's military assistance: 586 armored vehicles, 137 artillery systems, 10 Mi-24 helicopters, 10 MiG-29 fighter jets, 287 man-portable air defense systems, 44 air-to-air missiles, over 100 units of small arms, 89 mortars, 4 Grad multiple launch rocket systems, and more than 100 million rounds of ammunition.
In addition to gratuitous aid, in just 2022 to 2023, Ukraine purchased weapons from Poland worth more than 2.2 billion euros. The largest contract was a deal for 54 Krab self-propelled howitzers. Of these, 36 have already been delivered. The countries are establishing joint production of weapons and equipment. The parties have agreed on the joint production of 125mm tank ammunition. There are also plans for joint production of other weapons and military equipment, including the placement of Polish company manufacturing facilities in Ukraine.
It is necessary to mobilize the industry. Polish and Ukrainian industries must make joint investments, not only during the war but also to develop their deterrence potential. These initiatives are very much needed. It is also very important for us to improve economic relations. We will continue to support Ukraine.
Poland has become the main hub for supplying weapons to Ukraine. Also during the war, more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained on Polish territory. With each year of the war, the assistance and cooperation between Poland and Ukraine only grows stronger.
Probably the Kremlin really didn't want to lose face, but there was no other way. Well, because it seems that Russian know-how is created just for that. These are shots from the not-so-successful presentation of the first Russian humanoid robot with artificial intelligence. But the idol, as it was called, turned out not to be very sturdy and simply fell flat on its face. Am I the only one who thinks the robot has Putin's face? How do you like our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you